Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Mayanthi, I'm a qualified counsellor and I make videos all about how I became a counsellor and what you might want to know if you're looking to become a counsellor as well. Recently I've been making some daily vlog type videos, so I hope you've been enjoying them and feel free to check them out if you haven't already. But in this video I wanted to go back to addressing some of the counselling stuff, and because I've had a few questions in my comments regarding getting into counselling and having a counselling career. So in this video I wanted to address one particular aspect of becoming a counsellor, which is based from a question that I did get, and that is, can counsellors work as psychologists or call themselves psychologists in Australia? So I'll read out the full question that I got because there's a bit more to it. So basically it says, can counsellors call themselves psychologists in Australia, or only those who've done their masters in clinical psychology? And now they're asking in particular to themselves, if I do my masters in counselling psychology, will I be able to do a Psych D to practice as a counselling psychologist? Can you please help me find a clear pathway to becoming a counselling psychologist in Australia? So again, there's a few things in that. So I have made some other videos about counsellors and psychologists and the difference and all of that, so feel free to check them out if you want more information than what will be in this video. But it's always good to have a refresher, and I'm always happy to kind of go through the difference and how it works in Australia. So basically in Australia anyone can call themselves a counsellor, whether you've done a degree or not. Anyone can really work as a counsellor, especially if you're setting up a private practice. There's obviously going to be no necessarily any regulations on that, but I personally would not recommend working as a counsellor or calling yourself a counsellor if you haven't done any study regarding counselling and working as a counsellor. The counselling field is not fully regulated in Australia yet. I think it will lead to that and become that in the future. But at the moment, you don't have to be a registered counsellor to practice as a counsellor. There are registration bodies. So there is the Australian Counselling Association and the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia, which are regulation bodies that you can register with. And you would be more of a recognised counsellor if you register with them, because it means you have done some sort of degree and you are keeping up the supervision and the professional development that you need to be registered with those bodies. But you can still work as a counsellor if you're not registered with either of those two registration bodies. But in terms of becoming a psychologist, it is a lot more strict and it is a lot more regulated. So to become a psychologist, you do have to do the Bachelor of Psychological Science, the honours year, and then a master's. It doesn't have to be the master in clinical psychology. There are different master's pathways that you can choose, and counselling psychology may be one of them, depending on which university you're looking at. So again, as I tend to advise with a lot of things, talk to the different universities or to the training providers that you're thinking of studying at, because they will be able to give you the exact information on what their degree will lead to and where you'd be able to register with, or if you'd become a psychologist after completing that degree. But psychology is a very well regulated field in Australia, and it's basically like being a doctor, where you have to have professional development, have supervision, keep up a certain standard, and you have to, abide by the ethics. And as I've mentioned in other videos, it is a longer pathway to get there to become a psychologist. Psychologists can work as counsellors. So as a psychologist, you can diagnose mental health conditions and you would be more in demand. You'd have more options in terms of employment opportunities, and the income level would be higher. As a counsellor, there are different organisations and job opportunities that are around, and again, you can work in private practice, but the income level will be lower. Also, it's not subsidised by Medicare, so patients or clients coming to see you would need to pay out of pocket, or I was working as a counsellor and had clients who had NDIS packages. So through NDIS, counsellors can charge from their package, but not everyone wants to do that, and also not everyone is with the NDIS. So it really depends what sort of counselling you're offering and what kind of clientele you're working with. But my recommendation is, if you are going down the path of, you know, deciding between counselling or psychology, I personally recommend doing psychology if you can. As I said, it's a longer path to get there, but once you get through it, it will be more rewarding in terms of the opportunities that you'll get. But if you did want to just follow the path of becoming a counsellor, do your study, get registered and practice as a counsellor. Again, especially in private practice, you can kind of market yourself. Sorry if you can hear that beeping in the background. I think there might be a truck reversing. But basically, if you can market yourself and get the clientele, it would be quite rewarding, and you would be able to provide the type of counselling that you want to do. Whereas being a psychologist, yes, you can work as a counsellor and again provide the type of counselling you want to do, but a lot of psychology is around complex mental health as well. So if that's your interest area, then definitely go down that path. But if you're, say, wanting to be a relationship counsellor or work with youth, whatever it is, that's kind of based more around lifestyle and, you know, decision making, going through changes in life. Those types of things can be more addressed by a counsellor. You don't necessarily need like a mental health assessment or anything like that a psychologist would do. So the main thing is to think about what type of counsellor you want to be, if counselling is a path you want to go down. But if you're looking for more job opportunities and maybe working in mental health, working in hospitals, or even in private practice as a psychologist, then follow the path of becoming a psychologist. I personally didn't get the grades and didn't follow that path because at the time that I was at uni, I didn't really realize necessarily the difference between a counsellor and a psychologist. I knew I wanted to do what a counsellor does, but I wanted to be a psychologist. But when I realized that I could become a counsellor, I went down that path. And I didn't have the grades to get from the Bachelor of Psychological Science into the honours. I didn't even apply for it, but it was quite competitive at the time, so I didn't go down that path. But looking back, you know, if I had the choice again, I would probably try and get into the honours and get into the Masters of Psychology. But it is quite difficult. It is very competitive. Even if you have the marks, sometimes you don't get in. So definitely look at different universities and what the pathways are, because I know friends who have had to go interstate to complete their masters because they didn't get into the Masters of Psychology in any of the universities that were in our state, because it's limited. There's limited spots, limited universities, and it may not be your interest area either. So you may want to do a particular type of psychology, but they might not offer that at the university that you're looking at in your state. That was a long way to answer, can a counsellor call themselves a psychologist? So it is no, a counsellor cannot call themselves a psychologist. A psychologist can provide counselling, and they wouldn't necessarily call themselves a counsellor unless they're working in an organisation that calls their role a counsellor. Like for example, I was working at a particular university where they had a counselling service and they had psychologists working as counsellors. So they were generally referred to as counsellors, but they are qualified psychologists. So it depends where you work, but for the most part, a psychologist will call themselves a psychologist and work as a psychologist, but a counsellor cannot call themselves a psychologist, but they would be offering counselling and work as a counsellor. So to answer the next part of the question, if I do my Masters in Counselling Psychology, will I be able to do a Psych D to practice as a counselling psychologist? So I'm not actually sure what you mean by doing a Psych D, but basically if you do a Masters in Counselling Psychology, then you should be able to register and work as a counselling psychologist. So I hope that answers the question around if you qualify as a counsellor, can you work as a psychologist? Or if you qualify as a psychologist, can you work as a counsellor? In terms of what the difference is, I have made some videos about that. So make sure to just have a look through and check them out. If you can't find it, or if you have more questions in regards to that, leave the comment down below and I can answer it in another video. So I hope you found this video helpful. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.